looking on and conducting general discussions on internet governance matters. And so it's after that meeting, there was a meeting between Fadi Chejade, the CEO of ICANN, and Dilma Rousseff, the president of Brazil. Due to the coincidence of some views, coincidence also with the speech that the President Rousseff had made in the UN General Assembly. So this idea came up of organizing a meeting in Brazil for having the general discussions. The process from the beginning was followed in a bottom-up manner. Some committees were formed. One of them was the executive committee, that was a multi-stakeholder committee chaired by Demi Getchko and myself. And it was very interesting because there was no precedence of a meeting like the one that we were trying to organize. So we started to work from a blank sheet, and there was no antecedents of procedures and process. We have to define everything on the way, and there was no agenda. We took a couple of important decisions. One of them was that we built the agenda together with the community. We didn't start from a document prepared by us. That could have been one option, but we prefer to start from the contributions from the community. And it's important to mention that here you have in this slide a very quick view about the contents, the contributions received from countries, and you can see the number of countries that from which we received comments. In total, we received 188 contributions to the contents of the document, and 1,370 comments to the first draft. And you should add to that all the discussions that we had during the meeting itself. We didn't arrive to the meeting with the outcomes ready, but the discussions in the meeting were meaningful, and they were considered in the preparation of the final outcomes. You can see in this slide how many contributions were related with roadmap, and how many with the principles, and then some overall contributions, and from which stakeholder group they came. And finally, I would like to share with you that Diego. I have it here. Sorry. And this is the participation in the meeting. We had more than 900 participants in the meeting coming from different stakeholder groups. And I would like to pass the floor to Demi for making some also comments with regard to the work on the contents of the document.
Okay. Just to add a little bit more, this meeting produced two documents. One is some way a proposal of principles for internet governance, and it was divided in two sessions: the governance process principles and the governance principles. You have here, just to remind, that you have the full documents at the web. You can consult that. But anyway, just to remind the principal points, we have a very strong position in human rights and shared values. We have also a position protecting the intermediaries, the chain of value of the internet in some way. We of course, stimulate culture and linguistic diversity, and keeping the internet as an unfragmented space with free end-to-end communications regardless of content and so on. So I will not spend more on that, but of course the internet governance process has to be multi-stakeholder, transparent, accountable, distributed, and so. Then this one of the document, both documents was applauded by some minutes in the ending of the forum. We don't get full consensus. Of course, we have some positions that dissent from the content of the documents, but as a really multi-stake process, I think we did right in having these two final documents. The other one is the roadmap. The roadmap, yes, the roadmap. And as the principles, we in some way can seed this document in the Montevideo meeting about the positioning of ISTAR community and the technical community about some points out of the curve that has to be in some way make it in the right international community hands. And this is the principal points of the roadmap. And I think we have an excellent occasion here to discuss between us with this very interesting panel and populated with very main and important persons in this process, to hear from them and see if there is something going on because of this meeting, and how is the scenario we can see now, 1.5 years after the Net Mundial initiative. Then I pass again to Raul, to our first panel.
Thank you, Demi. So first of all, I forgot to mention at the beginning that we thank very much to the members of the Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group, Flavio Wagner and Ana Neves, for preparing this session. It was a lot of work in advance of the meeting. The discussion will be based on three questions, policy questions. So there will be 3 segments, and in each of those segments we will have one main speaker that will have up to 10 minutes, and a commenter that will be able to use up to 5 minutes for making comments on their own statements on each topic. The first one is a strengthening of the IGF, and you will see the policy question in the. Sorry, I forget that I have the country. And I will not read all the policy question, but it is about what's based on the outcomes of the Net Mundial meeting, what has been the improvements in the IGF, and how they meet the recommendations from the Net Mundial statement. And we will have a main speaker, that is Benedicto Fonseca. He doesn't need too much introduction, but Benedicto Fonseca Filho is the co-chairman of the IGF Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group, the MAG. He's the director of the Department of Scientific and Technological Affairs of the Ministry of External Relations of Brazil. Since 2010, he has participated in several international fora related with Internet governance issues, such as the Internet Governance Forum, the WSIS process, CSTD, the GAC in ICANN, and in particular, he had a very relevant participation in the Net Mundial meeting, of which he was a member of the Executive Multi-Stakeholder Committee responsible for organizing the event, including the agenda discussion and execution, as well as for coordinating the process that led to the creation of the Net Mundial statement. So please, Ambassador Fonseca.
Muito obrigado. Eu agradeço ao Raul por essas palavras. Eu tive o prazer, o privilégio de trabalhar, né, conforme já foi indicado, na Net Mundial, no comitê executivo, na companhia do Raul e do Demi e de tantos outros colegas. Então é um prazer poder falar um pouco hoje sobre o que foi essa experiência e olhando para o futuro, como isso se reflete em termos de fortalecimento do IGF. Bom, antes de entrar no tema principal, né, para o qual fui convidado a falar, eu gostaria de fazer alguns comentários sobre a importância que nós atribuímos ao IGF e ao que foi a Net Mundial. Bom, o IGF para nós, para o Brasil, para o governo brasileiro, quer dizer, eu me expresso em nome do governo brasileiro, mas esse sentimento é o mesmo que os outros setores têm. é um fórum único, um fórum insubstituível para o diálogo, para a discussão dos temas de internet. E o nosso entusiasmo em relação ao IGF se deve ao fato de que o IGF representa globalmente o que nós praticamos no Brasil. O nosso modelo doméstico reflete o que é o IGF. O Comitê Gestor da Internet, que este ano comemora 20 anos, se baseia exatamente nos mesmos princípios do IGF, de ser um espaço para discussão, para articulação. O Comitê Gestor, inclusive, vai além, porque também é um espaço onde são tomadas decisões em relação a temas afetos, em algumas áreas afetos à governança da internet. Então, nosso total apoio e total apreço pelo IGF. Nesse contexto, a NET Mundial representou um experimento. Eu creio que a NET Mundial tem sido definida assim em várias ocasiões. Um experimento porque a NET Mundial não está vinculada a nenhum processo, não tem regras, não havia regras pré-definidas. Isso foi indicado já pelos moderadores. Nós tivemos que criar a NET Mundial, mas dentro desse espírito de proporcionar um espaço para a discussão de toda a comunidade global, de princípios e pensar o que seria preciso para aperfeiçoar o ecossistema da governança da internet. Então, eu diria, para resumir essa primeira parte, que a NET Mundial nos proporcionou lições muito valiosas. Primeiro, a necessidade de respeitar, trabalhando no ambiente multissetorial, de que cada setor também possa respeitar a maneira como os demais setores se organizam, como tomam suas decisões, um processo que, inclusive, demorou um pouco e retardou um pouco o início do processo, foi a necessidade de permitir um tempo adequado para que a sociedade civil, o setor privado, indicassem os seus representantes. Quer dizer, e nós sabemos que foi um esforço muito grande, porque se tratava da comunidade civil internacional, global, indicar 4, 5 representantes para ocupar os assentos, do mesmo forma do setor privado. Mas eu creio que esse tempo foi imprescindível para garantir que, ao final, os resultados fossem considerados legítimos por esses setores. Então, uma lição clara da NET Mundial foi a necessidade de que todos os setores do ambiente multissetorial trabalhem em um ambiente de respeito e reconhecimento mútuos. E bem que, ainda que o resultado nos agrade muito, o documento de resultados foi, como indicado pelo DEME, aplaudido e endossado pela grande maioria dos participantes, o processo da NET Mundial também evidenciou a dificuldade que é passar de um plano de discussão, de diálogo, para um plano de decisão, de tomada de decisão. Ainda que o documento final da NET Mundial explicitamente tivesse indicado que não era um documento mandatório, né, non-binding, ainda assim houve dificuldades de vários participantes em adotar, em endossar os seus resultados. E isso mostra essa dificuldade que permanece em encontrar um formato para que, no âmbito multissetorial, decisões sejam tomadas e não apenas discutidas, né? Que as questões não apenas sejam discutidas, mas que decisões sejam tomadas. Bom, passando ao tema principal da minha fala, quer dizer, de que maneira a comunidade da internet tem avançado para fortalecer o IGF, de forma a tornar o IGF uma plataforma para a discussão de questões emergentes ou temas para os quais ainda não há um encaminhamento adequado, por meio da identificação de formas de lidar com esses temas e proporcionando informações a esses temas. E eu diria que isso é um trabalho em andamento, em progresso, e claramente este IGF mostra que isso está acontecendo. O Brasil, como país anfitrião, está muito satisfeito em ver que os trabalhos deste IGF caminham na direção do fortalecimento do IGF, no sentido de que daqui emanem não documentos negociados, enunciados, não recomendações adotadas por consenso, mas informações muito relevantes para os processos de governança de internet em curso. Menciono o documento sobre políticas e iniciativas voltadas à conexão do próximo bilhão de pessoas, que é um documento que está sendo lançado neste IGF. É um documento de natureza pioneira que o IGF adota e que resultou de um amplo processo de consulta à comunidade e também de uma sessão principal aqui, aqui em João Pessoa. E, em resultado disso, o MAG, né, o Comitê Preparatório, com o apoio de toda a comunidade, está oferecendo a toda a comunidade internacional um documento, um compêndio que passa a ser uma ferramenta útil para todos aqueles que se dedicam a políticas de conectividade. Então, essa acho que é uma demonstração muito concreta de como o IGF está sendo fortalecido no sentido de proporcionar resultados muito concretos. E, além desse documento sobre políticas de conexão, mencionaria também documentos que têm sido preparados pelo que se chama o Best Practice Forum, né, os fóruns de melhores práticas ou de boas práticas, e as coalizões dinâmicas, Dynamic Coalitions, em torno de temas como spam, IPv6, o papel dos setores no processo multissetorial. Enfim, há um corpo de documentos e de subsídios muito tangíveis que estão emanando do IGF e que caminham na direção de proporcionar informações de muito boa qualidade para processos em curso. A outra parte do que se pensou que o IGF deve ser fortalecido também é no sentido de se tornar uma plataforma para encaminhamento e para a discussão desses assuntos. Nesse sentido, eu creio que ainda há muito a fazer. Nós, como eu disse, a NET Mundial mostrou a dificuldade que é passar de um fórum de discussão para um fórum em que são tomadas decisões, encaminhados assuntos. E, nesse sentido, eu creio que o IGF pode também se fortalecer, a comunidade global pode se organizar para que, por meio do IGF, em que o IGF, que é um espaço tão democrático, tão transparente, que não tem o peso, ou não está cingido por regras tão estritas como alguns processos nas Nações Unidas, em outros processos, quer dizer, o IGF tem uma possibilidade de experimentar e de propor formas inovadoras, porque, a meu ver, a governança da internet é o setor em que, por excelência, se exigem novos paradigmas de governança. Na internet, claramente, não há um modelo único que se aplica a todas as situações, a todas as circunstâncias. Um dos resultados, entendo, que tem resultado do esforço da comunidade internacional, e eu me refiro a um exercício que foi feito no âmbito da Comissão de Ciência, Tecnologia e Desenvolvimento, que é um exercício de mapeamento de questões e de mecanismos para tratar dessas questões. Quer dizer, evidencia que há uma diversidade de questões que se abrigam sob esse conceito de governança da internet, que vão desde direitos humanos, segurança. Temos visto, basta olhar a agenda do IGF para ver como que há uma multiplicidade de temas. Então, eu creio que o IGF pode ter um papel de, ao examinar temas específicos, pensar não apenas na discussão dos temas, mas também um formato, uma moldura, um framework para lidar com essas questões. Creio que esse é um aspecto que ainda pode ser fortalecido em relação ao IGF. E, demais, o que eu diria é que a visão que foi projetada pela NET Mundial, me refiro mais especificamente à parte que fala do roadmap, né, do mapa do caminho, em que aponta questões a serem encaminhadas no âmbito da ICANN, mas também em relação a temas como segurança, como combate a crimes, quer dizer, relaciona vários temas, indica que há necessidade de melhor conhecimento em torno de temas como jurisdição, como o papel dos setores no formato multissetorial, eu diria que na medida em que esses processos que não estão diretamente ligados ao IGF, mas que estão avançando, a visão que foi projetada pela NET Mundial está sendo realizada. A transição no âmbito da ICANN está sendo processada, tem havido um fortalecimento das discussões em torno de segurança, em torno de crimes. Então, eu creio que aquele mapa do caminho e os princípios que foram traçados pela NET Mundial permanecem válidos e é um desafio para a comunidade global encontrar formas de lidar e reafirma o nosso entendimento, e aqui concluo com isso, que o IGF tem um papel muito importante, insubstituível, talvez, para desempenhar, tanto na discussão desses temas que não estão suficientemente amadurecidos e resolvidos pela comunidade, mas, inclusive, para indicar caminhos como esses temas podem ser tratados. E isso requer, como eu já disse anteriormente, que os setores trabalhem nesse ambiente de respeito mútuo, de reconhecimento mútuo. E eu devo dizer que esse é o meu 4º IGF, e eu vejo que essa é uma tendência que tem se fortalecido. Eu noto cada vez mais entre os setores maior diálogo, maior abertura para acolher opiniões, mesmo que sejam diferentes, mas no espírito de buscar um caminho adiante. Eu creio que esse é o caminho para o futuro. Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Fonseca. So on the same issue, we will invite Jacqueline Roth to make comments on this. Jacqueline is a Vice President, International Public Policy and Regulatory Affairs for Verizon Communications. She leads the group that is responsible for global public policy development, advocacy, and guidance. She directs activity in US and international forums, such as the International Telecommunication Union, the OECD, APEC, and the Internet Governance Forum. She is a member of federal advisory committees to the Department of State and to the US. So, Jacqueline, please, welcome.
Great. Thank you very much for this opportunity to be here. One of the characteristics of the multi-stakeholder approach is to have business represented at the table, so I'm pleased to have carry out that role today. And also particularly pleased to join in this, this opportunity with Ambassador Fonseca, because you have been such a leader for many years around all these issues. The only thing that came to mind as you were talking, where I thought, well, I can say I might have done more, is that I've been to all of the Internet Governance Forums. So, but otherwise, your leadership is truly admirable. I was a participant at the Net Mundial last year, so all of those experiences are very direct for me. And as I said, the reason I've been to the IGFs is because our company, Verizon Communications, is very engaged. We are an internet service provider in many different ways, and so from the beginning of the WSIS process and through the IGFs, we've thought this is a very important place to be, and the format of multi-stakeholder approach is extremely important. So I will, many of the points that you covered were, not surprisingly, the kind of strengths and trends that I had in mind, but I hope I can just add a bit on this, on our topic. And in the principles themselves, they do, in the roadmap and the institutional improvements for the IGF that we discussed 18 months ago, there were a couple of specific things or ways of thinking about things that were written in the document, and specific improvements for the IGF included to have more outcomes and analyses of policy. So as the ambassador mentioned, the best practices forums to me have been an excellent tangible result in that regard. They included strengthening multi-stakeholder participatory mechanisms, spam or unsolicited email, which has been an issue we've been discussing for many, many years, and this was the first time to actually have practices out there. IXPs, Internet Exchange Points, again, a very important piece. I know Raul Echeverria, for example, has been working on that, and I've been at IGFs with him on that for many times. IPv6, and then CERTs, the computer security incident reporting. And finally, there's been one on online abuses against women, and I think that one is particularly important. It's not an easy topic, and great work was done around that. Another specific guidance that was given is to do more work intersessionally. And again, the excellent project on connecting the next billion was specifically developed in between the IGFs. It was selected, it was developed, extremely useful papers. The main session was recognized as, some said, one of the best in years. And it's an overall initiative that exemplifies the core values and the mission of the Internet governance community. So I could say, for example, from a business perspective, that is something that we really think it should be a focus. We're very much looking forward to sort of working more collaboratively and doing even more on that. And it's a great match, of course, with the launch of the Sustainable Development Goals, where we need to have this close integration with the expanding Internet and its multi-stakeholder governance framework in order to optimize success in that area as well. Regarding the others, another thought that I had is that the MAG planners worked very hard to encourage sessions on highly relevant topics with meaningful results. So there we had as examples the WSIS Plus 10 session, the main session on sustainable development, and on cybersecurity. I think we had 2 days on cybersecurity, or maybe it spilled over and so on. So these are key issues for today and the future. I would also note the value of the workshops, which again, I think we're just deeper, more engaged than any year that I've seen. And I always try to make a point of participating in a number of those. I was in 2 of them, and in both cases, one was increasing accessibility for persons with disabilities, and the other was about cross-border data flows, trade, inclusiveness, economic growth, and those things. And in both cases, the emphasis was really to have case studies and to come up with ideas for solutions, not a policy paper, but everybody was encouraged to do that. So I would just throw those out as a little bit more of a detail on the points that were covered previously. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for being indulgent with the moderator. And I think that we will have more opportunities to speak later during the comments from the audience. So I will pass the floor to Demi Getchko for introducing the policy question.
Okay. Now we have the question that's related to the principles. I read the question. It's the policy question number 2. Are organizations, processes, and fora that form the IG ecosystem working according to the principles of Internet governance as proposed in the Net Mundial statement? How do they operating principles align to those principles? Are there efforts to improve alignment where needed? And the first speaker, 10 minutes, is Ms. Anne Carblanc, de France, is member from OECD. It's, of course, OECD is an intergovernmental organization. Ms. R. Carblanc is head of the Digital Economy Policy Division of OECD in the Directorate for Science, Technology and Innovation, STI. Her division develops a better evidence-based and more effective policy framework to promote the growth of digital economy and its contribution across society. Prior to joining the OECD, she held the position of Secretary General, Director of Services in the French Commission nationale de l'informatique et de liberté civile. She also served 10 years in France judicial system. Mrs. Anne, the floor is yours.
Many thanks for the invitation and for the introduction. It is a pleasure to be in this main session. I don't know whether someone has the... Thank you so much. All right. You mentioned the origin of the Net Mundial, but I wanted to go back to IGF in Baku, 2012. There was a main session, and I remember excitement in Baku about perhaps beginning to think about principles for internet governance and policy, and building on principles developed by different stakeholders, whether governments or business or civil society or international organizations, among which the OECD, from different perspectives. And I would like to quote Wolfgang Klein-Wachter at that moment, saying, we have a proliferation of principles, but if we had a set of principles, if they were very high level, non-binding, and include all stakeholders, they could give us a guideline. They could strengthen the commitment of the various stakeholders to follow certain very general rules, like internet should promote human rights, internet should be free and open, internet policy should be transparent and based on the multi-stakeholder model, the architecture should be end-to-end, internet should be safe and secure. In other words, in 2012 in Baku, Wolfgang called for general principles with which everybody could agree. 2015, the Net Mundial conference undertook to do just that and produced a multi-stakeholder statement which was finalized during the conference. The event was recognized as a success by the OECD and the statement was welcomed. Today in this session, we want to generate a discussion on the implementation of the Net Mundial statement, and we want to take stock of progress made in different organizations and entities to align with the principles. I will try to do this for the OECD as clearly as possible. As you may know, the OECD mission is to develop evidence-based policies in a broad range of topics to help governments foster prosperity and fight poverty through economic growth and financial stability. This is the convention of the OECD. In the area of internet governance and policy, the OECD has for now 2 decades developed influential guidelines to help governments preserve the open and unified internet that is needed to support economic growth and social prosperity in the respect of human rights and fundamental values. In 2011, the OECD Council adopted an important recommendation on principles for internet policy making. This recommendation supports a flexible, multi-stakeholder approach to internet policy making and strengthen international cooperation. It calls for shared policies and practices to attain the greatest possible coverage and use while managing security risks, protecting privacy, children online, intellectual property rights, and the free flow of information. My colleague Lorraine Portion-Cola has produced 2 overview tables that compare the Net Mundial principles with the OECD Internet policy-making principles, which will be made available on the website. And we can see that many of the Net Mundial principles reflect the OECD ones and vice versa. But the OECD past and ongoing work cannot be encapsulated in a table, so I will try to provide a brief overview of how our work supports or relates to the Net Mundial principles. So if we go to the human rights and shared values in the Net Mundial Internet governance principles, human rights and shared values are intrinsic to the OECD Convention. which says economic strength and prosperity are essential for the attainment of the purposes of the United Nations, the preservation of individual liberty, and the increase of general well-being. Human rights and shared values are also mentioned in several OECD legal instruments, including the Internet Policymaking Principles. They are also included in the mandate of the Committee on Digital Economy Policy, which is dealing with all these issues. They are also included in the current draft for our ministerial next year in 2016, through a reminder that countries are committed to the values of freedom and democracy, to the rule of law and respect for human rights, and to increasing economic, civic, and social opportunities for all, which is the end goal. Freedom and expression, freedom of association, these are referred in several OECD instruments, but we do not conduct any specific work on these fundamental liberties. UNESCO rather does, and sometimes we work with them. Privacy has for more than 30 years been a focus area at the OECD. The 1980 guidelines, which was the first set of international principles for privacy protection, has been revised in 2013. The privacy guidelines include, with respect to surveillance, a specific provision, and this provision says exceptions to the principles of the guidelines, including those related to national sovereignty, national security, and public order, should be, first, as few as possible, second, made known to the public. Accessibility, this is an important issue on which we can certainly improve. We're currently considering having a reference to accessibility in the draft ministerial declaration for the Cancun ministerial. Freedom of information and access is referred to in several instruments, and specific work on the communication infrastructure and services touches directly on this issue, as did work in cooperation with UNESCO on local content. Development is one of the objectives of the OECD and is included in the founding convention. The goal being to contribute to the economic development of developing countries, in addition to the development of members. And specific work has been done. For instance, we had, in cooperation with the World Bank, a big conference on ICT for development. We also have streams of work on digital innovation and development. And there will be a reference to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in the Cancun draft ministerial declaration. In summary for this, our strong point, I would say, is privacy. Our weak point at this stage is accessibility, but we can certainly progress on this. In terms of principles like protection of intermediaries, we issued a large report in 2011, which could certainly be updated today. And we have a principle on limiting the liability of Internet intermediaries in the 2011 Internet Policy-Making Principles. Culture and linguistic diversity is not an area of focus for the moment, but our work again with UNESCO on local content looked at this important aspect. And our current work on the open internet, the economic benefits of an open internet, also looks at this issue. Unified and unfragmented space. This is where the current work on the benefits of Internet's openness, which builds on the Internet policy-making principles, is important because it aims to provide evidence on the Internet's catalyst role for economic and social growth. In particular, the relationship between Internet openness and international trade, innovation and entrepreneurship, social well-being, and macroeconomic performance. We trust that this work, which is complex, which will take years, but is very important, will demonstrate the relevance of the Net Mundial and the OECD Internet policy-making principles. Security, stability, and resilience. We just released a new recommendation of the Council on the management of digital security risk for economic and social prosperity. It was presented in one of the workshops this week. Open and distributed architecture, the internet policy making principle on refer to the need to promote the open, distributed and interconnected nature of the internet. And there is a lot of work around this principle. And enabling environment for sustainable innovation and creativity is the same. We have a lot of work in this area and a principle as well. In summary, our strong points are the work, and our strong point is our work on the principles for a unified and unfragmented space and security. I would say that our weaker points are on cultural and linguistic diversity, despite our work with UNESCO. Finally, just to go very quickly through the Internet governance process principles, I've checked all of them because we are all implementing them, putting them in practice. In conclusion, one could say that the focus of the OECD is on economic growth, not so much human rights, it's true, but social prosperity and well-being are important objectives in the convention for the Secretary General of the OECD and the OECD Council. And again, we trust that our work, qualitative and quantitative work on the open internet, will demonstrate the relevance of the principles, Net Mundial and OECD. We can certainly strive, and we will strive, to improve on accessibility and cultural and linguistic diversity. We hope that our ministerial next year in Cancun, which will gather OECD ministers and partner ministers, will provide the opportunity to indicate us the road ahead in this area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Carblanc, for this very comprehensive explanation. Now we call for comments. Ms. Carolina Rossini, member of Public Knowledge Civil Society Organization based in the US. Carolina Rossini currently serves as Vice President for International Policy and Strategy at Public Knowledge. She is a Brazilian lawyer with over 15 years of experience in internet and intellectual property law and policy. Alongside her work in public knowledge, she is also a global partner Digital International Associate and an ex-lab fellow. She sits in the advisory board of Open Knowledge Foundation for UK and Brazil, Instituto Educa Digital, Coding Rights, Internet Lab, IDRC, Research Open Education Research for Development, and Research Network. Ms. Rossini, the floor is yours.
Obrigada, Demi. Obrigada, Benedito, pela sua importante intervenção. Okay, changing to English. So first, I would like to say how honored I am to join this discussion table today. I think Brazil exercised important leadership to balance some of the internet governance narrative of the past years. And I think that was really important to actually bring a development perspective to all of our discussions and actually to call attention for those development-based principles and how they should actually influence and impact on these discussions, not just here in Internet Governance Forum, because at the end of the day, we cannot take decisions here or make policy here, but also how we can use those Net Mundial principles to develop some accountability from a civil society perspective, but also actually partner with countries and companies on exercising peer pressure internationally on countries that are actually more repressive than others. So from a civil society perspective, I was also at the Net Mundial initiative, and I was very glad to see how creative and organized the meeting was in terms of really receiving inputs from all stakeholders, and that was a wonderful experiment and was a very exciting experiment. So it's really interesting interesting to look at that and then compare it to a lot of other fora where actually we are regulating internet, even if some folks do try to not label that fora, that forum has an internet governance forum. So I'm talking about forums like multilateral trade agreements. I'm talking like the OECD, and I'm also mentioning ICANN and other things. A lot of folks do see those elements as part of internet governance. ICANN is the most obvious ones. But a lot of folks don't see, for example, trade agreements as part of Internet Governance Forum. Me and some research colleagues, we did a mapping of 10 years of trade agreements that the US have with some other countries, so bilaterals that have then led to the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreements. And we use the layers framework to identify every clause that would impact in every layer of the internet. And everything that we are discussing here is there, from DNS to spectrum, to youth, to consumer rights, internet, to cross-data flow, and to privacy. So I would always, and I think I've been, folks probably are tired of me saying that because I said that in a lot of the panels I participated this week. And I think finally this community is paying attention more to that. On another related topic, I went again through the Net Mundial principles, and I was actually trying to compare where those topics were appearing. So I take the liberty to address some of the OECD comments right now. As you all know, in June, the week of 23rd of June next year, we're gonna be, the world is gonna witness the OECD ministerial. I will not refer to the WICES and the UN process because my colleague Enya will do that, and that's in December, so we have to keep a look on that timeline. But the OECD regarding privacy, some of the privacy work there. First, I want to thank OECD because actually OECD is one of the forums that early on have opened its discussions for multi-stakeholderism. So I'm part of CISAC for many years now, and I think there are a lot of CISAC actually founders in the audience right now. Marianne, Mark Holtenberg, and all those folks are around here. So while it's true that they have allowed that, I feel that the draft declaration coming out for the next ministerial is worse than some of the discussions we had in 2002 and before than that. So I would hope that in the declaration that will come out of OECD, we actually take into consideration the Net Mundial principles, even with all the stakeholders not being extremely happy. Civil society, for example, was not happy with ISB liability. A lot of folks were happy enough with privacy. So let's take that advantage to actually move forward and let's try to do that. Another interesting thing, I see my time just ended. Again, our trade agreements. One of the things I do want to mention regarding trade agreements is that a lot of issues regarding access to knowledge and freedom of expression and trade, and in terms of cross-border data for trade, that's also being dealt in OECD, and that also appears in the Net Mundial principles. They are not at the same ground of what I called consensus among stakeholders. So I would invite everybody to try to look at these comparisons and think, if we did a great step towards the future and towards a great consensus in Net Mundial, why are we taking steps back in other fora? So I think that was my role here, to really call attention for this much broader set of places where internet regulation is being discussed and made. Thank you, Dennis, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ms. Rossini. Then I pass rapidly to Raul to the next set of questions.
Okay, thank you, Demi. Let's move to the policy question 3. This is about how are the items in the Net Mundial roadmap being covered by the current internet governance ecosystems. We will have as a speaker Dr. Jeanette Hoffmann from Germany. Jeanette Hoffmann is a political scientist with a focus on internet governance. She heads a research group on internet policy at the Berlin Social Science Center. She is co-director of the Humboldt Institute for Internet and Society and professor for internet policy at the Berlin University of the Arts. Current research interests include multi-stakeholder processes and the role of technical, legal, and social norms in internet regulation. I will ask the speakers and commenters to be strict with the time because we are running a little behind the schedule and we want to open later to have some time for public participation. Please, Janet.
Thank you, Raul. I'm clearly aware that there is time pressure. Still, I would like to use the opportunity and say that Net Mundial clearly was my personal highlight in 15 years of internet governance participation. I met a lot of great Brazilian experts, both in public sector, civil society, and the technical community. I learned a lot from them, and towards the end it really moved me to tears. Hasn't happened often in this field. So thank you for the chance being given to participate to that process. Now, when we look at the roadmap of Net Mundial and what happened over the last year, I would say it's clearly a mixed bag. There is progress in some areas, for example, in the area of strengthening the IGF, perhaps also extending its term beyond the usual 5 years that we have now had for twice. But there's also there are a lot of areas where there is still a lot to do and there is clearly room for improvement. I want to focus on 2 aspects that I find very crucial. One of them concerns what is mentioned at least twice in the roadmap, and that is meaningful participation. Meaningful participation, I would say, depends at least on 2 conditions. One concerns resources. What we see in internet governance in general is a clear imbalance in terms of resources people have for meaningful participation. That concerns, on the one hand, the difference between the global south and the global north, but it also concerns differences across stakeholder groups. And these differences, imbalances in terms of resources is not only a matter of money, it's also a matter of expertise, of organizational skills, on staff, on all sorts of things. So if we really believe in meaningful participation, that is clearly an area where that needs improvement. But I think there is also another dimension to meaningful participation, and that concerns the topics under discussion. We need to ask ourselves whether all the relevant issues that impact internet governance are really subject to multi-stakeholder processes. Carolina already pointed out this aspect. I would say the answer is clearly no. And the 2 examples that immediately come to mind are trade agreements and cyber security. Both of these issues are discussed elsewhere in closed fora. So if we believe in the future of meaningful participation and in the multi-stakeholder approach, then we need to also discuss areas that are so far treated behind closed doors. I would also say that opening closed policy-making fora to meaningful participation may increase the chance that another recommendation of the roadmap might benefit from it, and that is the collection and processing of personal data by state and non-state actors in accordance with international human rights. If we open mass surveillance practices to the scrutiny of multi-stakeholder approaches, we will see other benchmarks for assessing these areas. So that was the first aspect, meaningful participation. The second one concerns the recommendation that all internet governance organizations should develop and implement principles of transparency, accountability and inclusiveness. This area is still work in progress. It's now common sense that the institutional architecture of internet governance is very distributed and heterogeneous and not suited to intergovernmental or centralized solutions. On the other hand, internet governance processes seem to still be in a state of infancy, struggling with the intention to be different from governments and intergovernmental organizations, but nonetheless having to be answerable and to sort of provide due process to all people participating. An example of this seems to be the IANA transition. The effort needed to get this done shows really such high transaction costs that we need to ask ourselves whether we want to carry on that way in the future. It is my belief that internet governance needs to undergo a process of constitutionalization, and this process would consist of at least 3 elements: implementing rule of law, making sure that there is a respect of human rights and that all policy measures are grounded in human rights and that we apply democratic principles. And I think these 3 elements need to be really shared by all internet governance organizations, even if they implement them in different ways. So even if the practices in internet governance are very different, I do believe that principles of multi-stakeholder approaches might have to move a bit closer to what we developed in the world of intergovernmental processes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Janet. Very well organized the speech, and you use less time than you had. Yes. Yes, maybe it's because she's German. Okay, our commenter in this on this topic will be Ambassador Chris Painter from the U.S. State Department. Mr. Painter is the coordinator for cyber issues of the U.S. State Department. In that position, he coordinates and leads the United States diplomatic efforts to advance an open, interoperable, secure, and reliable internet and information structure. Prior to joining the State Department, Mr. Painter served in the White House as Senior Director for Cybersecurity Policy in the National Security Council. He coordinated the development of the President's 2011 International Strategy for Cyberspace and chaired high-level interagency groups devoted to international cyber issues. Please, Chris.
Thank you very much. And I also want to echo what many have said, that having been at the Net Mundial meeting, that it really was one of the most both exciting and empowering meetings that I've been to in 23 years. So that's saying something, and it certainly, I think everyone came away from there really very energized. And I suppose I have a more positive outlook than maybe the last speaker in terms of what I see as some of the movement since then. And the Net Mundial principles, as many recall, and the roadmap captured not only what was aspirational to be done, but also some of the things that were being done in a multi-stakeholder manner. And of course, depending on the topic and the organization, that might have a different feel. One place I think it's worth pointing out that could better reflect the items in the Net Mundial roadmap is the WSIS Plus 10 review that's currently underway in the US governments. It's people throughout the community. The GCC launched something called the Global Forum for Cyber Expertise, which we talked about, and one of the things in the roadmap was capacity building and the importance of capacity building. Here, although there's much more to be done, I'm pretty happy that there's been such a great push and momentum around this issue, both in terms of connectivity, but also in terms of policy. And the GFCE was again multi-stakeholder. It wasn't just governments doing it, it was governments partnering with the private sector and civil society to do the various projects, and we were very proud to be a founding member of that. ICANN was mentioned, the transition. I think that, as the U.S. said when we announced that we were willing to make this transition of the IANA contract, we'd only accept a multi-stakeholder solution. And, although multi-stakeholder enterprises are always messy, I think there's been tremendous progress made there, and there continues to be, and it's really been a very interesting conversation with many stakeholders. Now, I would agree in all these forums that we need to find ways, and I think we're all looking for ways to make them more inclusive and more participatory for everyone. And that indeed is a challenge, but that's one challenge that NET Mundial did very well with remote hubs and other issues. I think we need to be creative in thinking about that going forward, and I think there are ways certainly to do that. So I look across the board at all of the different NET Mundial roadmap principles, and I don't have time to go through each one of them, but I'd say that they're reflected in the real growth that the panel talked about in the beginning in terms of the strengthening and the vibrancy of the IGF. And all the discussions we've had in the last couple of days, and the more effective means those discussions have taken place going forward between IGFs. And I'm very hopeful that the IGF's mandate will be renewed for a long time, not just for a short period of time, so there's predictability, and we can have these discussions in this forum, but this is not the exclusive forum. It's a great forum for them. So I think there's more work to be done, to be sure, but I think we've done quite a bit since Sao Paulo. I think we should be proud of what we've done and build on it and work into the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will pass the floor to Demi for coordinating the fourth segment of this debate.
Thank you. In this segment, we will hear some additional comments in these questions. We have 5 minutes for each commenter, and I will call first Dr. Nick Weiner from University of Cape Coast, Ghana, to say some words. Dr. Nick Weiner pioneered internet in Africa for 2 decades, establishing some Africa First internet connections and helping set up key organizations, including the African Network Operation Group, and also was founding chairman of AFRINIC. He helped establish the computer science department at university, where he has taught since 1979. He was the first African to be elected to the board of ICANN, served as an at-large director of ICANN for the African region from 2000 to 2003. He is also a member of United Nations Secretariat General Advisory Group on ICT, chair of Organization on African Unity Internet Task Force, and president of Internet Society in Ghana. Dr. Weiner was awarded the Jonathan B. Postel Service Award for this pioneering work, and also was inducted into the Internet Hall of Fame in 2013. Dr. Weiner, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I think it is indeed true that the experience at NET Mundial was really invigorating. And the outcome was also very realistic in the sense that it did capture much of the practices from some of the communities that I'm associated with. My comment will be mostly on balance, the need for balance, and also accepting incremental growth. The good thing about NET Mundial was that not only did it capture existing processes, making it realistic, but it also attempted to capture the needs of development, and that, of course, rings a good bell to me. Now, enhancing the multi-stakeholder mechanisms at a national level is occurring, partly because of the IGF, National IGF program, and I think that is very commendable. The focus on the needs of the developing countries and the building of capacity is currently being mainstreamed, and you can see it appearing in all the different issue topics that are being addressed at IGF while we are here. I thought I might make the following caution. It is indeed true that cultural and linguistic diversity is extremely important in improving access. And in fact, I myself am actively involved in trying to capture the local languages in my country so that they are preserved and so on. However, if one is to be successful, one needs to think global as well. And so when we're coming out with our solutions, we should be thinking about how it will benefit the whole world. And if we don't, then the solutions will not thrive, and that may turn out to be a problem in itself. One other issue that I thought I might raise has to do with a workshop which I enjoyed attending, and this was workshop 52, and it attempted to capture a sense of the global public interest in critical internet resources. It's interesting to note that perhaps several months before the Sao Paulo event, ICANN, that had been mentioned in the statement that says that it should be working towards leading to a truly international and global organization serving the public interest, was also defining what public interest was to be. So it turns out at this workshop that ICANN may in fact have been the only organization that has made an attempt to define what public interest might be. I suggest that every other organization in the ecosystem internalize the same thing. And hopefully we might discover that either we have one good global definition or scope or statement as to what public interest might be, but it would be interesting to do a bottom-up thing and see if we can get what public interest is for everyone. I also like to note that it's difficult to plan if a multi-stakeholder activity is bounded. If it is unbounded, then you can make real investments in the resources that are required. And so discussions of 5 years for IGF, 10 years for IGF, and so on, for me, it's not very constructive. It should be just no limits. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Quaynor. The next speaker will be Dr. Anya Kovacs. Dr. Anya Kovacs directs the Internet Democracy Project in Delhi, India. The project engages in research and advocacy on the promises and challenges that the Internet poses for the democracy and social justice in India and beyond. Dr. Kovacs' work focuses especially in questions regarding freedom of expression, cybersecurity, and architecture of Internet governance. She is currently a member of the Investment Committee of the Digital Defenders Partnership, of the Steering Committee of Best Bits. It's a global network of civil society members, and she's very active in the WISE's revision. She's also worked as an international consultant on Internet issues, including for the United Nations Development Programme Asia Pacific and for the United Nations Special Rapporteur on freedom of expression, Mr. Frank LaRue, and has been a fellow at the Center for Internet and Society in Bangalore, India. Dr. Kovacs, please.
Thank you so much, Temi. I too found Internet Mundial a great inspiration, and I'm really grateful to be able to be part of this session, trying to assess progress we have made since then. The first thing that really struck me when I read through the outcome document again in preparation for this session was how relevant it remains and how much value there still is in that document today, about 1.5 years later. In terms of process, I agree with others that perhaps we have seen the most progress in the IGF, and if that shows in this IGF, I'm sure it's partly thanks to the outstanding Brazilian government organization, but also thanks to the many changes that the MAC has been making over the past year, especially making the IGF much more outcome-oriented, and I do think that contributes quite a bit to its value. And for small civil society organizations from the Global South like ours, significantly increases our reasons to actually come to the IGF. I also want to flag here something that hasn't been mentioned yet, namely efforts to bring human rights concerns into organizations like the IETF, initiative that has been undertaken by colleagues of ours, and from what I understand has actually been received with quite gotten a very positive response. Since the Net Mundial, one trend I think we've been seeing is that slowly there has been a greater recognition of the fact that there is also a space for multilateralism within the internet governance. Why I want to flag that here is because when I was trying to kind of map out progress in different institutions, where I think we have the greatest cause for concern in general is sadly processes where our governments take the lead, especially because in these processes the outcomes are so often against the principles as well. I think that's true at the national level, in countries in all parts of the world, where we see that legislators are continuing to consider and adopt legislation that goes to the principles outlined in the section on human rights. And I think we've discussed quite a few of those proposals in this IGF as well. We also see that at the global level. Carolina already flagged the concerns in the OECD ministerial draft statement. I have to disagree with Mr. Painter on the extent to which civil society is included in cybersecurity debates. I think with the Global Conference on Cybersecurity, we were very grateful to the Dutch government for actually really making an effort to include us. But I think we were also very conscious that in most of those fora, the processes that really, or the decisions that really count are taken in rooms where we are not invited. And I don't think that has really changed. Finally, I want to make some comments about the World Summit on the Internet, on the Information Society, which I think many people forget is not just about Internet governance, it is an Internet governance process. And in the draft outcome text, we see some really positive language around a call for stronger developing country participation, and also a call to provide stable and secure funding for that. And this comes back to a point Jeanette was making earlier. But I agree with Mr. Painter that there hasn't been enough recognition of what we've done since 2005, and that in a way the document does the opposite from what the Net Mundial principles did. Rather than looking forward, it wants to take us back. It is a government-led process. There are individuals who are working very hard to make sure that other stakeholder groups have considerable input, but it's not been easy, and the final parts of the process, it seems, will remain closed. All references to human rights language are balanced by references to the UN Charter on sovereignty and non-interference in the affairs of a state. On enhanced cooperation, there is a proposal for an intergovernmental working group. That's not very encouraging if we see how the WSIS review process itself includes other stakeholder groups on certain parts, etc., etc. So it feels sometimes as if the references to the contributions of other stakeholders in documents like that are mostly lip service and not a genuine recognition of what different stakeholder groups bring to the table. Not having more governments on board to endorse the Net Mundial principles is then a disappointment, but I think what it also does is contribute to a growing distrust between governments and other stakeholders in processes where perhaps we might even recognize that governments take a legitimate lead. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kovacs. Now we will hear Marcus Kummer. Marcus Kummer is member of Board of Directors of the Internet Corporation for Aside and Names and Numbers ICANN, and the Secretary of the Internet Governance Forum Support Association. He is also advisor to the Chairman of the IGF Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group, and has been involved in Internet governance discussions in various functions since 2002, working first in the Swiss government, then in the United Nations IGF Secretariat, and subsequently in the Internet Society. Mr. Kummer, please.
Thank you, Demi, for the introduction. It's also my pleasure to be part of these panels. Like others, I found it very exciting to be part of Net Mundial, although I was not in tears like Jeanette at the end of it. And I would like to start by paying kudos to both Demi and Raoul for leading the preparatory process for Net Mundial. The draft document that was the basis for Net Mundial really exceeded all expectations. I never expected such a solid document coming out of the preparatory process. And the true innovation you both applied was applying rough consensus methodology to policy development. And this is unlike a UN process where you usually have what we call a Christmas tree approach. You add decoration after decoration until the tree is overloaded, and then you start the process of tidying up and taking off decoration. And usually that process is extremely difficult, as every delegation is very much attached to their little Christmas ball they put on the tree. Whereas here, what you did was looking for commonalities and leaving out outlying proposals. Now, it's understood that some governments found this difficult to accept, and I know that some governments did not sign up to it because of that, but it was a real true innovation, and thanks to this it allowed us to get the substantive outcome, the positive outcome that we in the end had. The second point I would like to make was what I call the cross-fertilization between the IGF and the Net Mundial. My thesis is that Net Mundial would not have been possible without the IGF. The IGF had created a climate of confidence among stakeholders that allowed us to, at the Net Mundial meeting, that allowed us to put governments in a queue behind the microphone, and governments actually accepted it. At one point in chairing a session, there were so many people behind the microphone that Ambassador Fonseca came to me and said, "You have to do something to let them all speak." And what we did then, we reduced the time slot from 2 minutes to 30 seconds. And you had senior government representatives who accepted that and who played the game. And I don't think that this would have been possible without 6-7 years of IGF practice in living multi-stakeholder cooperation. But now, the Net Mundial has also now cross-fertilized the IGF, and building on Ambassador Fonseca's and Jackie Roof's comments, I very much agree. Now I think it created comfort among IGF participants to move forward towards more tangible outcomes in an IGF context. And the best practices forums is one element of that, and the thematic priority we had, the intersessional priority of connecting the next billion, is another one. And we find it a little bit more difficult in moving to intersessional processes with the dynamic coalitions, but it's part of the same process. We're not at the end yet, but we have 10 more years to refine this, and I think we can build on this methodology also to take the IGF a step forward. With that, I think, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Now I think it's time for open mic, but before opening the mic, I suppose, we'll use this minute reminder for Carol to make some comments on cybersecurity.
Thank you. I always prefer when you call Carol, because anytime you call me Carolina, I know you are mad with me for some reason. So I want to actually comment a little bit on the cybersecurity issue. That's another thing that came out many times here. Cybersecurity is something that is happening at I think cybersecurity regulation is something that's happening at accelerated rate in Latin America. The Organization for American States, through one of their departments, is actually touring the region and training policymakers and enforcement on how to develop cybersecurity technology and groups of experts, and also their country cybersecurity strategies and agendas. So why do I say that? It's because sometimes countries believe that that's not the space for civil society. And one thing that I want to express is that civil society is very sensitive and open to the legitimate interests of cybersecurity. all of us have kids, or most of us have kids. A lot of us we use online banking. A lot of us have our identity online. A lot of friends that are journalists and activists do suffer also cyber attacks, TNS attacks all the time. So we also want cybersecurity, but for that we also want to be included on those things. One of the good steps that did happen at OAS is that actually Edson Lanza, who is the special reporter for freedom of expression, was finally included in some of those discussions and trainings, but I think we need more attention and a more careful crafting of those agendas. So in Latin America, there are a bunch of countries actually drafting their agendas and their strategies. So those countries are Colombia, Mexico, Uruguay, Paraguay, and Brazil. Brazil is very advanced, and thankfully the civil society is actually already in contact with the military for those conversations. But I think we still have a long time to go. So that's it. 1 minute. Thank you so much, Danny, for that.
Thank you very much, all the speakers. We will invite now comments from the audience. There are 4 mics. Please be strict. You have 2 minutes, but we appreciate very much if you are as concise as possible and just use less than that time. Please, Subi. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Subhi Chaturvedi, for the record. I do want to start out by congratulating the Net Mundial process. You have truly inspired many new changes, innovation, and practices. You have taught governments and other stakeholders as to how we can limit interventions to 30 seconds. You have taught us how we can queue up around the mic, and you have also taught us how often issues can find a solution, and the ideas of rough consensus. I have been personally involved with the Net Mundial process, so I feel very passionately for it. There are many lessons that the IGF has learned, but like some of the other speakers on the panel, I come back with a sense of a mixed response as to where we could have taken those learnings. I know there are challenges and difficulties, but when we look at where the Net Mundial initiative traveled to, whether it's the WEF Net Mundial initiative, we want the processes to remain open. We want them not to be in intimidating, overwhelming spaces. So now there is a website for collaboration, but whatever we have gained in terms of ground, we don't want that to be lost as a lesson. So just reinforcing the very principles that Net Mundial started out with, the 3 issues which remain unresolved: the questions on mass surveillance, the question on due, necessary, and proportionate, difficult and contentious issues like net neutrality. It has been a safe space, and we want to see that same spirit reinforced and nurtured. And I think a lot of us will take more and greater participation as far as that is concerned. And a special shout out to Carolina for saying that there's always space for civil society in cybersecurity. Thank you for reinforcing that.
Thank you very much, Subi. We take 1 speaker from here and we go to the remote participation. Please introduce yourself.
Gonala Astbrink, Australian chapter of ISOC. I share with many people here the excitement of being part of Net Mundial. I was delighted to have contributed to the human rights principles, specifically accessibility for people with disability. I'm presuming that when Anne Cablon discussed accessibility, she was relating to disability. Anne mentioned that the OECD has committed to doing work on accessibility principles in preparation of a draft ministerial statement, and we welcome this initiative. As this is new work, we urge in the spirit of Net Mundial to consult with the disability community in this preparation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please remote our remote comments.
Thanks, Chair. We have a question from Mr. Muthuswamy, Internet Society, India. He says, Net Mundial complements the work at IGF and follows a less formal format for discussion. It's a visionary initiative. His question is, why is there a delay in Net Mundial's event roadmap? Thanks.
Thank you very much. I will take, because we have time constraints, I will take all the comments and questions from the audience. And for closing, we will give 1 minute to each of the speakers for making the remarks and answering. So pay attention, please, to all the questions. Please.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Eduardo Rojas, soy embajador de Internet Society por Bolivia y presidente del directorio de la Red Nacional TIC Bolivia, que es una asociación de sociedad civil. En mi país, la articulación entre sociedad civil con Internet Society está permitiendo generar modelos y respuestas para promover la defensa de los derechos humanos en la sociedad de la información. Se nos ha constituido un problema insuficiente hablar solamente de derechos en Internet, puesto que con la perspectiva de la convergencia tecnológica, la centralidad en el ser humano nos lleva a pensar en defender los derechos, ya no el patrimonio, solo a la tecnología, sino a los seres humanos. Esta iniciativa boliviana hoy está permitiendo que se articulen actores a nivel nacional institucionales para promover unas asociaciones de defensas nacionales de los derechos humanos en Internet, lo que también visualiza un nuevo rol de sociedad civil. Sociedad civil, al defender los derechos humanos, puede tener aportes para hablar de las diferencias económicas de los operadores privados como de los gobiernos y también de sociedad civil en la construcción de esta sociedad y el respeto a los derechos humanos. Me gustaría saber cómo visualizan ustedes la perspectiva de crear asociaciones nacionales de defensa de los derechos humanos en la sociedad de la información, articuladas a las comunidades técnicas como ISOC, para garantizar principios globales en las iniciativas sectoriales que están naciendo en los ámbitos nacionales.
Muchas gracias. Next speaker.
Thank you very much. My name is Marilia Maciel. I am a researcher and coordinator of the Center for Technology and Society of Getúlio Vargas Foundation Law School in Brazil. I too was part of the organization of Net Mundial. I had the pleasure to work in the executive committee and be chaired by Raul Wendemi, and it was truly an amazing experience. I think that the strength of a document that is non-binding, it's a soft document like the outcome document of Net Mundial, is the number of times that this document is quoted and mentioned and referenced. So to me it's a little bit disappointing to see how scantily this document was made reference to in the process of reviewing towards the summit on the information society on the last part of the year in December, and how governments could not quote this document or make reference to these documents and documents that have been approved throughout the process. So maybe we could, if you could react to that, I'd like to hear your reactions. I think that this document could have been made reference to as well by non-governmental organizations, and maybe this is something that we could do more coordinately in the future. In order to carry out the cooperative spirit of Net Mundial, and based on the fact that Net Mundial was a one-time event, Net Mundial initiative has been created by some actors. It has now a multi-stakeholder coordinating council, and the role of this platform is basically to take this document. This platform is completely anchored on the Net Mundial outcome document, and to work with other organizations and stakeholders to try to find ways to really implement the goals that were set in that outcome document. We had a very interesting session on day 0. I encourage you to take a look at the recording and the transcripts. I think it was really constructive. In terms of the methodology, I think that the methodology of Net Mundial was one of the greatest outcomes of the meeting. And this methodology has a lot of lessons to be brought into the IGF. A lot has been done this year in terms of progress, in terms of making the IGF more outcome-oriented. I just would like to suggest that the amazing work that has been done this year is made better than next year. I think that exercises such as the one conducted by the dynamic coalitions should not be conducted in the fringes of the IGF, but should be something really brought to the core of the process with much more publicization and advertisement. My very last point is that among the challenges, many of them have been mentioned before, but I still think that one issue that triggered Net Mundial, although it was not the main issue on the agenda, was mass surveillance. And I think that what we have seen since Net Mundial is a very worrisome trend in terms of countries trying to put forward laws that would neutralize or legitimize legitimize mass surveillance. And this is really something that we should look into, not only develop technology like encryption, this is amazingly important, but laws are very important too. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Do we have a more remote comments? No yet? Okay. Next.
Muchas gracias. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Carlos Guerrero. He venido aquí como parte de la iniciativa IGF 2015. En primer lugar, quiero agradecer por esa oportunidad de estar aquí. Es inédito que un joven peruano, soy de Perú, esté aquí formando parte de los debates que se han venido dando durante esta semana. Me parece que si bien en muchos de los workshops donde he podido participar se han discutido temas muy interesantes, temas polémicos como neutralidad de la red y cero rating, creo que en el panorama general y por lo que he conocido de anteriores ediciones de este evento, decimos mucho, repetimos las mismas ideas, pero no vamos a ninguna parte. Estamos repitiendo una y otra vez las mismas discusiones, pero al momento en que los gobiernos empiezan a implementar políticas relativas a Internet y a los derechos humanos que se manifiestan en estas plataformas, en las nuevas tecnologías, no se ve reflejado todo lo que se conversa aquí. Asimismo, quiero agregar que junto conmigo han venido más de 70 personas jóvenes de Latinoamérica. Esto es una oportunidad increíble, dado que hemos podido participar de estos eventos y llevar una voz diferente, una voz desde la perspectiva de los jóvenes a esta clase de eventos para que puedan conocer cuáles son nuestras preocupaciones y perspectivas. Me parece que esto es inédito, no ha ocurrido antes, debe seguir ocurriendo. No debe acabar este evento y en los siguientes no repetirse. Y me parece que dentro de todos los stakeholders se deben apoyar iniciativas que lleven a las voces de las personas que no están incluidas en estos debates. Y bueno, debo agradecer a la organización, dado que este ha sido un gran evento. Espero que se pueda repetir la participación de los jóvenes en futuras ediciones. Gracias.
Para ser tu primera vez hiciste un uso admirable del tiempo. Bien. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Jutta Koll from the German Center for Child Protection on the Internet, and I've been very pleased to see that the rights of children and the safety of children have played an important role in all the debates on the Internet Governance Forum this year. But also I have to mention that the community of child protection people have been very disappointed that children and youth have not been mentioned in the Net Mundial statement. And I just wanted to make that point. If you carry on with that work, I find it very important, and I speak for the community of child protection people, that the rights of children, for their dignity, for their privacy, and for their physical integrity have to play a role in that statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other speaker? If not, we will move to the last round of comments. Do we have remote participants? No? Okay, thank you. So we can start maybe for you. Anne, are you ready? The challenge is use 1 minute.
Okay. Well, first of all, it was a very rich discussion, and there is apparently consensus on the importance of the Net Mundial principles. I heard what was said, that perhaps we should consider having a reference in the ministerial declaration, and also the need to work on accessibility on access for people with disabilities. And I will bring this back to the OECD and to our members. I think they will be probably receptive to these suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chris, please.
So that's twice 30 seconds. It's a lot of time. I'd say a few things. First of all, one comment just said, in some ways, do we think we have the same conversations again and again? But I've seen those conversations over the course of the last 10 years, and the conversations have become much stronger. And what's happened is all the stakeholders, including governments, are listening, and it really does help to have the conversations and continue to have the conversations. On cyber cybersecurity, I just say, look, there are some times when governments are making policy, but the more open they can be about those policies, the better. And that's something that we model in the capacity building we do. When I have bilaterals with many countries, including in Latin America, that's always one of the things I talk about. We've built a lot of our policies in the messy, multi-stakeholder way, and that's important because they make them more legitimate at the end. I think that's important. And finally, on issues like, on the last comment about youth, I attended some of the youth session. I will tell you that's one of the greatest parts of the IGF is getting that perspective. I spoke last year at the closing after a 14-year-old from Macedonia. I thought was actually the best speaker in the entire closing ceremony, probably. So I think it's really important to get that perspective because they're the ones who are really going to own and operate and use the internet in the future.
Thank you very much, Chris. Nee?
Yeah, I'm very pleased to hear development described as a human right and a shared value. On surveillance, I sympathize on the subject. On the other hand, I wish you never wish you had more surveillance. Thank you.
Thank you. Check.
I would like to echo the comments about the richness of the conversation today. I think that one of the things we need to emphasize even more, taking away from this type of activity, is the value of the multi-stakeholder approach to things in general. We have not talked a lot about local, national developments, etc., but there are so many things going on around the world that are either enhancing the global seamless internet or posing some risks to it. And I would just say, let's have as one takeaway to try to take the structure of using a multi-stakeholder approach for good policy outcomes and apply that as we go back to our areas around the world in just that way.
Ambassador Fonseca.
Thank you. My last comment, I'd like maybe to reaffirm something we have been saying, that we believe in dialogue, in discussion. And one thing as a diplomat that I have been witness is that different processes ignore each other. What is taking place here is largely ignored by most of the representatives in New York and Geneva and vice versa. And I think that a key for improving internet governance is to build bridges among people that are working in different contexts, in different configurations, to better understand each other, to seek ways to work in mutually reinforcing ways. I'm not naive. I know it's not just by putting people together that we'll come to world peace and everything, but I think we can improve if people can better understand what others are doing in different contexts. And I think there is a role for IGF in doing this. As I have said in my previous intervention, IGF works under rules of engagement that are flexible. We can make experiments. I think in the course of this IGF, we made a very important experiment that I think will be further reflected upon later on, that we brought here the two co-facilitators of the WSIS Plus 10 process that is taking place in New York. And they committed to receive a report, a summary of the discussions here, and take it to New York. So I think that's the kind of thing that IGF could do and improve and look into ways in which it can put people together. Because otherwise, I think we'll be discussing here a few things, people will be discussing there a few things, and we'll be largely ignoring one another. I think, if I can, I know I expired my time, but I think if I can just briefly try to reflect on why Net Mundial statement was rejected by so many governments. I think this reflects that difference of cultures, because governments, for an outcome to be legitimate, most governments would think that we need multilateral, and by multilateral, I'd like to indicate not unilateral, not something that is decided by one government, two governments, or a group, but the whole community coming together. And governments, may we like or not, are in principle and by design those who represent their peoples, who have a mandate. So I think for most governments, or for many government, there was a difficulty in Net Mundial to be negotiating in a context in which you were not clear about what kind of mandate the other people have on the other side. Some people represent organizations, but some people represent themselves. And on the other side, you have representative of people of a country that has 1 billion person, and you have their representative that is mandated to represent. So I think maybe we should think about that kind of, how to address that kind of legitimacy from the perspective of the various stakeholders. I think for the multi-stakeholder approach to work, again, it must respect the cultures that each stakeholder group has, and those are substantially different. I think if we do not understand what the other side thinks and how legitimizes the outcomes, we will be talking to each other, having consensus among ourselves, but being largely ignored by the other group and vice versa. Thank you.
Thank you, Benedicto. Carolina? No? Final remarks?
I didn't ask.
Janet?
Final remarks.
Okay, I'd like to echo Chris Painter's comments. I think if one listens, one will notice that we don't have repetition of debates in a strict sense. They are moving even if on a snail's pace. And what I find striking over the last years is the increasing amount of expertise that we see brought to the table at IGF meetings. Both people come who would not have come earlier, but IGF also inspires people to really get smart and into the issues to make a difference. And as an academic, I do believe that strong evidence, good arguments, and high-quality debate do make a difference in societal self-determination.
For me, one of the big themes throughout this IGF has been this issue of distrust between governments and people. And in a way, I feel a growing distrust when it comes to internet governance processes. And I think what we should do is really think more about how we can bridge that gap also from our side. And I think Ambassador Fonseca just made quite a few suggestions on that as well, including about respecting the culture of all the stakeholder groups and mentioning the visit of the co-facilitators. And Marilia also mentioned some things in her intervention, but for example, when she said that non-governmental stakeholders too should refer much more often to the Net Mundial outcome document. But I think it's valuable to start documenting these kind of suggestions and start thinking about what that means in practice. Like if we want to respect other cultures, if we want to respect what governments do, what does that mean for how we should move forward? I'd be really interested in thinking about this more. Thanks.
I share Marilia's frustration of the lack of mentioning of the Net Mundial outcome. We experienced that a few weeks afterwards when we had in Geneva a meeting of the Commission on Science and Technology for Development, and some governments steadfastly refused to have any reference on the Net Mundial. But I also share Ambassador Fonseca's assessments of the reasons why. I think the procedure was simply too advanced for many governments to accept. And also I would like to build on Jeanette's and Chris's comments. Yes, in the past 10 years we have been discussing the same issues over and over again, but I would maintain it was each year at a higher level of understanding. I think in education you call that spiral learning. You revisit the same issues, but you move up a spiral and you're higher up in the level of understanding. And really, the quality of the discussions this year was extremely high. I think it was, in terms of substance, really a very, very good meeting. Compared to the very first meetings, we have come a long way.
Thank you very much, all. While this is not an official report, because there will be the report done by others later, I would like to share with you some of the things that I have heard in this discussion. In general, I have heard positive evaluations of the Net Mundial process and Net Mundial meeting, even if we have to recognize some disappointments that have been expressed in the room. Some of the words that were associated with the Net Mundial were highlight, inspirational, invigorated. So I think that it speaks by themselves. There was an comments also in the use of rough consensus processes for policy discussion, the cross-fertilization between IGF and Net Mundial, the progress that has been done in other areas like IANA transition, on IGF improvements, best practices forums were mentioned, and also the intersectional work on connecting the next billion. Very positive remarks about the discussion, including the session held this week in the IGF. Progress that have been also made in other forums. There were mentions to the need to continue improving participation of all stakeholders in all internet governance and other related processes. That has been mentioned some cases where the participation of stakeholders is not good enough. That principles are already visible in different forums and organizations, and we have to remember the presentation from OECD on that regard. The Net Mundial documents are being referenced in many places. That is an indication of success of the Net Mundial. And there is a need to bring Net Mundial principles to other internet-related forums. And my final remark is, I think that it was Ambassador Painter who mentioned something like there is a lot to do, but a lot has been already done since the Mundial meeting. So I think that is a good way to close my remarks. And I will please ask Demi to take the control.
Thank you very much. I think it was a very enlightened discussion. I'm very happy to be here, very honored to be here. I want again to thank very much our MAG facilitators, Flávio Wagner from Brazil and Ana Neves from Portugal. I remind you that we have 3 rapporteurs that are doing the work of getting all this information we got in this room: Diego Canabarro, Vinicius Santos, and Rafael Carneiro. And I want, before passing for the closing words of Percival, I just found an old article from Professor Wolfgang Kleinwachter related to the Net Mundial. I read 2 paragraphs of that. I read, never before there was a document with internet governance principles which has such a broad political support from key players from all stakeholders groups. And there is no mechanism to bring a wrongdoer to an internet court. But Net Mundial document allows naming and shaming if a corporation or a government does behave badly in cyberspace. Thank you very much, and I pass Percival to the end words.
Antes de encerrar, antes de encerrar e agradecer a todos, eu gostaria de reforçar o que foi dito mais de uma pessoa aqui nessa sessão, da importância dos documentos gerados no Net Mundial, o mapa do caminho e os princípios, que nos últimos 2 anos vem influenciando todas as discussões que se tem, influenciando em maior ou menor grau, mas vem influenciando todas as discussões no âmbito da governança da internet. Então, a todos, um agradecimento muito especial às pessoas que conduziram esse processo e vem se empenhando em dar seguimento a esses documentos nos últimos 2 anos. Um agradecimento também muito especial a todos que participaram aqui e remoto. A gente, mais uma vez, eu vou repetir que chegando na sexta-feira, as pessoas estão aqui discutindo, debatendo o dia inteiro, desde a segunda, desde algumas pessoas começaram reuniões paralelas desde o sábado. Então, assim, muito obrigado. Nós estamos muito felizes em ter realizado essa sessão e recebê-los aqui em João Pessoa. E assim como o Net Mundial, que aconteceu há 2 anos e as ideias, os textos e os debates, eles se mantêm vivos até hoje, que essa sessão e as demais debatidas aqui no IGF 2015 mantenha-se para além do encerramento desse fórum. Muito obrigado a todos, as pessoas que estavam remotas, as pessoas aqui, obrigado à mesa, as pessoas que fizeram esse IGF e essa sessão.
Ladies and gentlemen, we kindly ask you to leave the room. We need to reorganize for the last session. Thank you.
Não. Tô brincando, tô brincando. Por favor. Acho que dá pra começar deste lado. Stakeholder processes about this commission.
Dessas coisas?
Can you see there is something
Não tem mais ninguém, né, gente?
Hoje à noite, tem pra ver, gente.
Do you need the nitro?
Oh, you're taking it?
Decidí participar en el Youth IGF ya que considero que el Internet es nuestro futuro. Ahora que está creciendo, estamos a tiempo para fortalecer las estruturas ya creadas.
E o que eu espero para esse IGF é justamente isso, mais representatividade para os jovens.
Yo creo que los jóvenes no solamente debemos comportarnos como usuarios ante el Internet, yo creo que lo que nos interesa también es saber acerca del futuro.
E a governança é isso, é a colaboração de pessoas diferentes, de locais diferentes,
diferentes pensando em uma solução viável para todos.
Es por eso que debemos mantener una Internet abierta y hecha también para y por jóvenes.
Ahí está.
Acabamos de llegar a João Pessoa para participar en el foro de gobernanza de Internet con los chicos del programa del Youth IGF. Es raro y a la vez no, es como que ya lo conoces, pero no tenés esa naturalidad de cuando tenés a alguien frente a frente, ¿no? Y hace 2 meses que venimos trabajando todos y ahora nos vamos a ver todas las caras, va a ser loquísimo.
Realmente a mí lo que me importa es que a nosotros los jóvenes se nos dé la oportunidad de presentar nuestros ideales, nuestros principios, para así también poder hacer un legado a las próximas generaciones que vienen a futuro.
E esses desafios, que são desafios globais e que a humanidade ainda não encontrou respostas, eles estão sendo discutidos a partir da perspectiva juvenil. O futuro da rede está sendo discutido pelos protagonistas da rede de hoje e de amanhã.
E nós queremos contribuir para que essa geração, apesar das diferenças e das vocações distintas, possa conversar e tirar barreiras.
Decidí participar en el Youth IGF ya que considero que